welcome back to my channel. Today I'm making another light box from the game Hollow Knight, and this time I decided I was going to do the Hive because it's just a really cool part of the game and I really like that area. So yeah, let's just get into it. So first I started on one of the wall layers, and I was pretty scatterbrained throughout the whole thing, so that's why I didn't start at the very front. I jumped around a lot. But yeah, I started on the wall layer and I just drew out this honeycomb pattern all over the whole thing, and I cut it out. And when I drew it, I realized that they didn't look that straight or anything, but when I cut them out, I went back and made sure everything was super straight and nice. And yeah, that's just what I'm doing here. And this was pretty fun for me. I don't know, I really enjoyed drawing and cutting out the wall layers and drawing the hexagon shapes. I don't know, it was just fun. I enjoyed it. So there were two main types of layers in this light box. One of them were the wall pieces, or just the honeycomb textured pieces. And then there were the layers where it looked like honey was like dripping from the ceiling and everything. So yeah, those are the two main types of layers. All of these drippy layers look basically the same, so I only showed cutting them out once. It was kind of annoying though because I couldn't cut them curved with my knife, so I had to cut them straight and then go back to each individual little one and round it out. But I think in the end it turned out pretty good, so I'm not complaining. And I thought the ground looked pretty plain and boring, so I cut some holes all over them just to add some details. Next I start on my second wall layer, and this one's pretty much the same as the first, but I just made it come in a bit more so it would be like closing in a bit. And yeah, I just did that, drew it out, cut it out, and everything was pretty much the same. I move on to the layer that has the knight on it, and the footage cut out where I drew this layer, but here it is. I just added a couple lights that I saw around the hive, and the platform, and some posts, and of course the knight. So yeah, and I'm just cutting out the platform that the knight's standing on and everything. I added some little posts and cut out the hexagon shapes on the ground and everything. And I didn't film when I cut out the knight either, which sucks, but here he is, and yeah. And here is where I decided that I didn't like how you could see through every single honeycomb shaped hole I cut. So I decided to get some parchment paper, or tracing paper more like, and glue it behind everything. Behind all the walls, the platform, the whole background you'll see later. I used it. And this really did so much, and I'm so glad I did this. It just made it look so great. So I go back through, and every layer I cut that has the hexagons on it, I go and I take some tracing paper, glue it on the back, cut it around to make sure it fits nicely and everything. And I also did this for the lights. If you saw in the layer with the knight, I just cut out the shape of the light. I didn't cut out the light bulb part of it, and I left that because that's when I decided I wanted to kind of do this. And I left out that shape so I could go with the parchment paper, cut a circle out of it, and then glue it behind that so it would look like a glowing light. And since it's the hive, I couldn't resist putting a couple bees in there. So here I am just drawing one of the bees, and this is where I went a little crazy with the tracing paper. And I decided instead of making the wings out of the cardstock, I would leave them out, and then I would cut them out of the tracing paper, and they would look super cool, which didn't really work. It just kind of didn't do anything really. It was whatever. So in the end it didn't really matter, but I think it was still a good attempt. And yeah, here I just did 3 of these bees, and you can see I did the 2 little guys and then this big one. And they turned out pretty cute. And if you saw my sketch, you saw that I didn't put anything in the background because I wasn't sure what I was going to put there. But I decided that it was looking pretty boring, so I looked around the pictures of the hive and I saw a bunch of these thrones or chairs, everywhere, like, and behind them there was a bunch of like shelves full of candles or books or something. So I decided to put that in there. So for this layer, I kind of wanted it to seem like it was buried or it was like an older abandoned area. So I tried to make it look like the platform was kind of under the ground a little, or it was covered a little by the ground. And I tried to do the same with the honeycomb wall, but I don't know if it really showed much or did anything. And then I just went and cut out all the details on the chairs, on the platform, and the ceiling, and then I did the light as well, and I put the tracing paper behind it like the other one. And yeah, that was pretty much it for this layer. And this layer is where I screw up because I was gonna do this layer and I was gonna do the shelves and have them nicely behind the thrones or chairs or whatever, and have the honeycomb pattern across the whole rest of it, and it would be like kind of the back layer, and it would be nice. And then I get to it and I drew it all out, I cut it all out, and then I put it behind the first layer to check it out, and it wasn't high enough. It barely even showed up above the platform. So I was like, okay, I don't want to redo this layer, but I screwed it up. So I just decided I was going to cut them out, cut off each shelf, cut out as much of the honeycomb as I could, and salvage it. So I thought I would just cut them out and I'd glue them onto a separate layer, but get the height right. So that's what I decided to do. But I didn't realize that the paper I chose to glue them onto was smaller than every other paper I used, even though it was in the same package. So I just had to deal with it. I cut off a bunch from the top and glued onto the bottom to move it up more because it was too small and it was just a big mess. But I still salvaged it somehow. So here I start on the very last layer, and this one I just wanted to do a whole layer of honeycombs because I just thought it would look good. So that's what I started doing. I drew them all out, cut them all out, and I decided to do this like the previous layer and cut out a thin border around the whole honeycomb shape and glue it onto a separate layer. I don't know why I decided to do that, but that's what I decided to do. So I just did that, and yeah, it turned out pretty good. I just used that previous layer as a guide on where to position the honeycomb so it would look good, and then I just glued it in place and that layer was done. And last but not least, I do the very front layer, that's the framing layer, and it's the same ground with the dripping ceiling. And yeah, this was pretty simple, it was just the same as everything else. And now it's time to assemble everything, and I just do the same as the previous light box, and I cut the strips that go between the same measurements and everything, and I just do the same. I start at the back and I work my way to the front, and as you can see, here's that layer that I messed up that was smaller, and you can see how I made it work here, and I just keep doing it until I'm done. So I glue in the bees when I'm done assembling everything, so that's why you don't see them here yet. And once I'm done gluing on the very front layer, I flip it over and I glue a piece of parchment paper behind it all. And then I just glue it into the box I made earlier and put in the fairy lights. footage was gone, but I just put the backing on after I put the lights in. And then here's the final product, and I'm super happy with it. Much happier than the previous one, honestly. And yeah. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, comment, share, all this stuff. And check out my previous video if you like this one.